What's up guys, Dan Frullani here and welcome back to another video. So what do I talk about today? You should know that I just got a new camera, my second camera, because my first camera is the Canon R6 and I've been using the Canon 90D and the Canon EOS R as my second cameras, but I just got a new one and it's the Canon R7. What are the settings you should use for videos, like real-time speed? Well, I'm gonna tell you the settings I use. So the first thing I do, I turn on the camera, video mode, and I click on the menu. And the first thing I do, I stay on tab number 1 and movie rec size for frame rate and resolution. I set it to 24 frames per second, like here it says 23.9. Here, why 23.9? Why 24 frames per second anyway? I mean, because it's a standard of the movie industry. That's what we see when we watch a movie. And why so? Because 24 or 23.9, whatever it is the minimum amount of frames, like images per second. Then when we play them together in a video, it gives us the illusion of the movement the most natural way. And also, we got used to see that in the movies, so for us, it looks natural. So we set it to 24 frames per second, and we continue. Resolution, here we have Full HD, 4K, 4K Fine, 4K Crop. You know what? I'm not gonna use 1080. My personal preference in 2022 is 4K, and I want to shoot the best possible footage when I film, so it's gonna be 4K Fine. IPB Light is the compression. It doesn't make any difference to me, but I'd rather set it to IPB Regular. I want quality. Then we want to select our picture style, picture profile, picture style. Tab number 3, we have picture styles, and my advice, stay away from them. Their quality is not. And it's not because it's the R7, it's just in general. Standard picture profiles don't really look good. I mean, even when they do, when we use one of those profiles and then we want to change something in post, like the colors, the highlights and the shadows, we don't have much flexibility, almost not at all, because when we use them for filming, what we get is what we have. Like if something is overexposed and blown out, we can't recover the details. And same thing when something is underexposed in the shadows and everything is dark, too dark, like black, the details are gone. So that's why my advice is to always shoot C-Log. In this case, we have on the Canon R7 C-Log 3. Here, on, okay. Then when we activate C-Log, what we see from the LCD screen is like all flat. I mean, there's no color, no saturation, no shadows, no highlights, it's like flat. So sometimes it's really hard to understand if the subject is really in focus or not and stuff like that. So we can activate the view assist on. That way, from the LCD screen, we see something like some shadows and highlights and saturation, and it's much better. That won't appear in the final footage, it will still be flat, don't worry, and you will be able to color it in post. My advice, use Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve. Also, Final Cut, supposed to be really good, but I don't know it because I use Resolve and I've been using Premiere Pro, so I can say these are awesome. Alright, before we continue, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and check the links in the description to see all my gear stuff and things, including this awesome camera. And check the link to Epidemic Sound if you want 1 month of awesome music and great sound effects. 1 month for free. Alright, so once we selected the frame rate and resolution and picture style, in this case C-Log, we can start setting things from the LCD screen now, for example. And the first thing I do when I shoot in C-Log, so all the time, set the ISO to 800. If it's C-Log 1, I set it to 400. If it's C-Log 3, to 800, because that's the native ISO when we shoot in C-Log for C-Log 3. For C-Log 3, ISO 800. Then we should set our shutter speed. The shutter opens and closes a certain amount of times per second. By setting a faster shutter speed, we get less light. A slower shutter speed, we get more light. But Since we're shooting movies, we don't have much flexibility with that because the shutter speed when filming has to be set to double the frame rate. So 24 frames per second should be 1/48th of a second. We don't have 1/48th of a second. We have 1/50th, close enough. So we set it to 1/50th of a second. This is, again, to get the most natural motion blur in the shot. If we set it faster, not only do we lose some light, we darken the footage, but the final video will look like jittery. And if we set it slower, there will be more light, but also there will be a very unnatural motion blur, like too much. So again, shutter speed 1/50th of a second. The aperture, also this one controls the light. The more we open it, the more light will pass through the lens and hit the sensor. The more we close it, the less light, darker footage. But also it controls the depth of field, the amount of space, the thickness of the space that will be in focus. So a narrow aperture like f12, f16, f22 will give us like everything in focus. Much stuff, like the space will be huge. The thickness of the space in focus. The more we open it, like f2.8, f2, f1.8, f1.4, f1.2, we let more light in and we reduce the thickness of the space that will be in focus. Like the main focus will be on the subject and everything in front and behind the subject will be blurred. And that's how we get some beautiful bokeh. Shallow depth of field. Lenses that open so much at f1.4, f1.2, but even f1.8, let's say, from f1.2, f1.8, they're called fast lenses. So when we think of cinematic, the more the background is blurred, the better. More cinematic, right? No. Actually, if you notice, in the movies, the background is not always melted. In the movie industry, they usually prefer to use a maximum aperture of f2.8. Then of course, if the background is really far away and compressed because of the lens, yes, it gets very blurry. But my advice, when you shoot videos, unless you want to achieve a particular effect, particular feeling, and you want to tell a particular story, at a certain point of your story that you really need the background to be like so buttery. My advice, unless you have to do that, just stick to f2.8. I know. I've been there before, and me too, in the beginning, very often. Sometimes I still do it. I tend to blur the background way too much. So then, let's say we're outdoors and there's so much light. So when we try to set our aperture to f2.8, let's say, or even f1.8 or whatever you prefer, but if there's too much light, you're not gonna be able to do that unless you use an ND filter. What's an ND filter? An ND filter is like sunglasses for your lens. Let me see if I have one here. Yeah, here I got one. This, basically, when you put it on, it darkens the footage, and it depends on its intensity, how much light it will take off, like 1 stop, 3 stops, 5, 6 stops, 10 stops of light. I use variable ND filters because their intensity is variable. Like you just screw it in and you rotate it like this, and when you're happy with the exposure, you're good to go. So you can keep a very wide aperture even with a lot of light, when the light is so strong, if you use an ND filter. Then the white balance, even though sometimes it doesn't really matter much because we can fix it in post, but it's always better to start from a footage that looks close to what we actually want in the end. So I seldom set it to automatic because sometimes it just doesn't stay the same. It changes even during the shooting. It gets even worse when you're recording and then you stop and then you start recording again, and the white balance will be different each time if you shoot automatic. So I just set it to 4800 Kelvin between, let's say, it depends. I try and see from the LCD screen, but usually from 4600 to 5000 Kelvin. I seldom use something above or below that. Then Stabilization. We have IBIS on this camera, so we shouldn't really worry about adding electronic stabilization, but if we need to, if we shoot handheld and we're not very confident, we can activate the stabilization, electronic stabilization, and it will crop a tiny little bit. I strongly discourage you from using the enhanced electronic stabilization because one, it's not really that good, and second, it crops even more. And this is already a crop sensor camera. We don't really need any extra crop, right? So, I guess I said all I had to say. Yeah, we got it all set. We got our Canon R7 ready to shoot, ready to film in real-time speed, the most cinematic way. Alright, that's all I wanted to say for today, and I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, smash the like button right now and subscribe if you aren't already again, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Oh yeah!